Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, The Latest School Technologies. Learn what it takes to transform the future of school spaces. Our presenter today is Mr. Mark Knox from NEC Display. Mark is a vertical solutions sales consultant for projectors at NEC Display, and is responsible for executing a solutions-based sales approach for NEC's impressive portfolio of display products within targeted verticals. Mark works very closely with the sales team and the product marketing managers to communicate and demonstrate NEC's technological advantages. Boy, I'm having troubles today. With over 15 years in the electronics industry, Mark has covered a large spectrum of responsibilities. He started as a custom integrator early in his career. He moved into project management role before shifting to the manufacturer side to help launch technologies that we're going to talk about today. Now, today's webinar is all about capturing the attention of students and making sure that it's important for educational campuses everywhere. In our webinar today, we're going to explore how to use display technologies to engage students, improve recruiting efforts, and to modernize the student journey. We're going to look at case studies focusing on common spaces, student centers, outdoor spaces, activity centers, and dining halls. My name is Julie Rolls. I am the training manager at PSA and EDGE, and I will be moderating our call today. I have just a few quick housekeeping items before I hand it over to Mr. Knox. First, if you have any questions throughout the course of this presentation, please type them into the question panel, and we will have time for Q&A throughout, if not by the end of the presentation. I will also be monitoring the chat should you run into any technical difficulties, and I will do my very best to get you back up and running. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Mark Knox. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much. Thank you guys for joining this webinar. Good morning and good afternoon to you. As Julie mentioned, my name is Mark, and I have the pleasure of working with Sharp NEC in the impressive portfolio of display technology, some of which we're going to discuss today. So if we jump right in, this is where I'd like to start, right? I always start every presentation with my 8 display questions. These questions should be top of mind whenever you are selecting display technology. If you are honest when you answer these questions, the answers will take you down the path of the technology that you should select. And of course, we'll talk about different scenarios in a moment. First question, who's going to be the primary viewer, right? We have a lot of different stakeholders on campuses. We have administration, we have athletics, we have academics, we have student activities. Each one of these viewers has different goals or different ideas on what they want in a display, right? So, for example, your athletics department might need something that's interactive if they're, going through plays or something like that. And then, of course, your business school may need something that is a little better when it comes to looking at spreadsheets or looking at dark text on a white background. Either way, these different viewers, these primary viewers, are going to have different goals, which we'll talk about in a moment. What's the content they're planning to view? Now, this question builds off of question 1. And of course, each viewer or each stakeholder is going to be looking at different content. So we want to take that into consideration when we are selecting our display technology. When or what time of day is viewing taking place? Of course, this refers to natural sunlight in the world of direct view LED, as well as projection, as well as glaze, as well as haze level on a flat panel monitor. We want to understand, is that sunlight going to be coming through an east facing window where, a classroom might have a 97% utilization rate all morning? And if so, then we need to maybe look at some technology that can stand up to bright direct sunlight. Of course, this is leading into the next question. Where is the display going to be used? Is it going to be used in an instructional sense in a classroom? Is it going to be used in a passive manner, maybe digital signage in a corridor or a hallway? Or is it going to be used for analytics, right? So we want to understand, again, what the goal of the display is going to be. How are the facilitators or users planning to connect to that display? Of course, there's your classic HDMI, there's bring your own device, there's clickable devices that you can cast directly to. We want to understand how and what's going to be the most ease of use in connecting to that display. Why are we putting a display in that space? What's the overall goal or vision? This is probably one of the most important questions, because when we talk about the goal or vision of a display or a space, we want to understand, again, what that stakeholder specifically is trying to do. And we want to make sure that we don't hit the Achilles heel from the next question, which was there a display here previously, and were there any concerns? The last thing we want to do is replace a problematic display or a problematic technology in a current space, due to environmental factors with the exact same technology, thinking that it's going to be an upgrade. We want to make sure that we understand the history of that space, the history of that room, to understand again, are we actually improving the situation? And then are there any other factors we should consider for this room or event or special events, things like that? Every room is going to have different environmental factors, whether it's humidity, whether it's vibrations from HVAC that may be on the roof or the ceiling. We want to understand all of the other factors, the X factors, some we can control, some we can't. But we do all this and we ask ourselves these 8 questions so that we can very simply avoid this, right? So this is my most current wall of shame. You can see most of these situations could have been avoided with some geometry maybe, or just a little bit of additional knowledge on how to configure a space. Now, hopefully these aren't representative of anybody on this particular webinar or anybody that's going to listen to this in the future. But at the bare minimum, we've all seen AV fails. We've all seen situations where they just didn't get it right, right? So again, we go back to those 8 questions and we want to understand how and what technology to use in specific scenarios. Now, today we're going to obviously talk about display technology because that is what Sharp NEC does, right? When we talk about display technology, I'm a little biased because at the end of the day, this is the part that everyone sees, right? This is the part that you most likely are interacting with. This is the part that when you look at, you are consuming the data that's on the screen. This is also the part where most people assume that they can take a less expensive route because of the commoditization of certain aspects in this particular category, right? We all understand controllers, we understand automation, we understand programming and things like that. A lot of those devices, you can't really take the inexpensive route. But when it comes to monitors, projectors, interactive flat panel, there's a lot of options out there, right? So we want to make sure, again, that if you're building a system and you're putting, some really strong nuts and bolts on the back end, that the part that the stakeholder is going to see, the part that they're going to interface with, that you actually understand the technology and you understand the benefits. So the parts you see, this could range from desktop monitors, laser projectors, digital cinema projectors, direct view LED, professional monitors, interactive displays, and of course, narrow bezel video walls. We're going to talk about most of those today in different applications. So this presentation really, yes, it is about the future. It is about the latest trends, but the reality, it doesn't matter what the latest trends are if you're not focused on enhancing the learning environment, right? And there's many considerations when we talk about the learning environment. And what I mean by learning environment, it really is how the instructor, facilitator, professor, teacher connects with the students, right? All the students are hopefully at the universities, they're at the schools to learn, right? That is the primary mission. They're there. Our job as integrators, manufacturers, is to make sure that we put the tools in their hands to be able to connect and engage with those students. Now, this is a simple flow chart of what I feel like is a classic example, right? This is at the University of Auburn. Increased resolution, brightness, color reproduction gives you engagement, right? Increased engagement. So we went from the traditional dual projector setup on the left-hand side, and we were able to upgrade them to 2 direct view LED screens. Now, again, the content that's going to be shown on these screens is probably not going to differ from technology to technology, but it's going to have better resolution. It's going to be brighter. The color reproduction is going to be more accurate, which is also going to increase engagement. In this particular scenario, the professors that use this space like to teach with the lights on, right? This room is a great room. It's got a lot of architectural features. You can see some of the detail there in the ceiling. They want to teach with the lights on. Well, that was a challenge when you're talking about traditional front projection. Again, understanding this space, understanding the goal, they automatically knew that they couldn't just replace 8,000 lumen projectors with 10,000 lumen projectors. It wasn't going to give them the result that they were looking for. So again, this presentation is about enhancing the learning environment. So if we talk a little bit about the learning environment, we talk a little bit about considerations. The first thing to consider is the workflow. Now, this is what I would consider a traditional workflow, right? You got your professor who's interacting with some form of mobile computer that's going to go on the network. Maybe that's a podium. It's going to go through some type of matrix switcher. You're going to get your image on a large view device such as a projector that's going to be displayed in 16:9, 16:10 format to a large auditorium. We hope that your student is engaging with that image and consuming that data to then make the connection back to the professor. You must consider what your workflow is going to be when you start looking at different display technologies, right? Because each one is going to have their own space. For example, a next workflow consideration. This is an example of a post-pandemic workflow. Your professor is going to interact with their mobile computer, going to go over the network. That student is maybe be remote. We can't control the technology that the student is using, right, on their own, whether it's a phone, whether it's desktop monitors. And then we hope, again, that they're going to connect with the professor, right? So, again, there's many different workflows to consider, but we have to control as many factors as possible. So this is where desktop monitors come in, right? The slide previous to this is where projectors or direct view LED comes in with a large venue setting. Now, if we're talking about students that are in the space, a lot of our rooms have been redesigned since the end of the pandemic because of remote learning. They've now are following a trend where they're actually switching back to more of a traditional large venue setting, but they're actually introducing some what we call hybrid attributes, right? For example, student sightlines, right? This is a huge thing that we didn't necessarily had to consider before because everything was focused to the front of the classroom. Now, if we're talking about the future of learning and the future of learning spaces, we're going to get away from your traditional classroom setups. Things are going to be more operated in what we call pods. As you can see from the round tables here, they're going to be in small groups. They're going to be in huddle spaces. They're going to be in hybrid huddle spaces, such as this particular example, where there's going to be flat panels, there's going to be projectors, there's going to be direct view LED everywhere. And wherever the student looks, they're going to be able to engage in the content. They're not just going to have to look directly to the front of the room. So, the key for display technology in the future is really understanding how to marry multiple different technologies into the same scenario. Sightlines are very important. Sightlines are important because resolution is important. When we start to take a look at resolution, we get into, of course, 1080, 4K, which unfortunately is more of a buzzword than it is actual utilization on our campuses today. And then, of course, 8K is even further out, but there are some 8K options. We want to look at typical seating distances in relation to resolution. This is something that we didn't have to pay attention to before, but since these resolutions are commercially available, we may be able to deliver a better bang for the experience based on this particular chart. So if you have a moment, you're interested in this type of content, go ahead and screenshot this chart. This is something that I just grabbed off of Google Images to illustrate, the optimal seating distance or viewing distance for these different resolutions. Speaking of 4K, all 4K is not created equal, right? So when we look at 4K from especially a projector standpoint, things kind of get muddy in the marketing, right? There's 4K enhanced, there's 4K ready, there's 4K capable, there's 4K UHD, and then there's just 4K. The reality is, if it's not 8.3 million pixels, addressable pixel for pixel, then it's not technically 4K. It has to be 4K something else. For example, 4K enhanced is 1920 by 1080 chip that goes through a 2 or 3 position shift to give you 8.3 million pixels, but they're all not addressable because you really only end up with 4.6 million pixels, right? And then, of course, if we look at traditional 4K UHD from a monitor or from some of your DLP projectors, you are looking at 8.3 million pixels because you're starting with a native resolution of 3840 by 2160. Again, it gets weird, but the point is, if you have a true 4K workflow, you want to make sure that every piece of that puzzle has the ability to handle 4K. So whether that's 4K natively, meaning pixel for pixel, which obviously is going to be at the top of the price range, or that's 4K with some shifting going on. There are different options that include the shift that will give you more or less pixels depending on, of course, budget, brightness, and things like that. You really want to dig into that because the worst thing you can do is have a 4K workflow with 4K devices everywhere, 4K content coming in, and not be able to display pixel for pixel on the large venue setting that the professor and the students come to expect, right? You want to make sure, again, understanding the dynamics of the room, that you're able to give them exactly what they give you. Meaning if they give you 8.3 million pixels, you can give them 8.3 million pixels right back. So resolution, 4K, sometimes the conversations can be cumbersome. I myself am available to have those conversations with you at any point in time. You'll see my contact information toward the end of the presentation. But just make sure, again, that you're really paying attention to the different marketing terms that are out there and what they actually mean. Now, another room type or another consideration, this is the future. Again, more screens, smaller rooms, less students. We're getting into scenarios, especially in higher education, where you're finding more rooms just like this. You're finding rooms that are more seminar-based or seminar-style rooms, where everybody is focused on the center of the space. So traditionally, we were focused on the front of the room. I showed you the hybrid huddle spaces with the pods, right? That focus is all over the place. Doesn't really matter. Professor's going to walk around. There's going to be group activity. Then you've got the seminar style, where the professor is literally standing in the pit. They're standing in the middle of the space. This is tricky because your sight lines are all over the place. Your professor really has no easy access to any of the technology from a tactile standpoint, standing in the center of the room. And then you've got the students, again, that are interfacing on their personal devices, as well as trying to see, if you look to the far left of this photo, virtual students as well. This is an example of mixing different technologies into the same space. And that is the future of the enhanced learning space. That's the big secret. The big secret is understanding how to bring in multiple different technologies at the same time. So in this space, you would see to the far left again, narrow bezel video wall product in like a 1x3 or 1x4 setup. On the opposite wall, you would see interactive flat panel, right? And then even if you think those laptops, those could actually be desktop monitors as well. If you wanted to give each student USB-C capabilities to plug into a desktop monitor to enhance the screen that they brought, with them in their backpack, you would be able to do that as well. So you've got all of these different mediums of display technology in concert at the same time. Again, that's the future. The institutions and the integrators who can figure out how to offer solutions with multiple different display technologies in the same room with coordinating colors, coordinating brightnesses, those are going to be the ones that are going to stand out and, again, be more engaging and enhance the learning experience. This is another example. I know it's a graphic, but work with me here. You've got students that are remote as well as students that are present, right? So this is what I would consider the classic hybrid scenario, but this is hybrid virtual. So in this scenario, you've got students that are front facing with projection displaying on a large screen in front of them with the professor focused in the front of the room. Now that in itself is a traditional setup so that the students that are in the space feel like they are not in a hybrid room. The students that are behind them on that wall, you bring them in virtually via direct view LED or narrow bezel video wall products, again, 1x3, 1x4 setup so that it's almost like a panoramic deal. You've got your camera system, your microphone system. You take into consideration microphone placement so that you don't pick up any of the noise level of the projectors, right? That's another thing that we got to be cognizant of. But again, mixing different technologies in the same space. Next one here, larger rooms, larger screens, distance students. So before, if you see the image on the right, it was one projector in the room for students who were sitting all over the place, right? I would argue that we never really took into account viewing angles because the student that's sitting in the front row to the far right of this image is going to have a hard time looking at the image that's on the wall there, right? So, viewing angles have been neglected, sight lines have been neglected, as I mentioned before. A dual projector setup would be better in this particular space. However, what would even be even better would be confidence monitors, not only for the professor, but then auxiliary monitors for the students, right? So you put auxiliary monitors either pole mounted from the center of the room or on the side walls, so that students again can see the content as the professor intended it. Then you've got the room on the left, kind of a funky shape. This is that hybrid seminar deal that we were talking about before. You've got students that are going to be looking in all different directions. In my opinion, the image on the left, the screens are a little too high. Again, you're trying to get a large screen in a space, I understand, but at the end of the day, is that going to be a challenge for the student to view, right? So you want to make sure that you can marry all of these technologies. Don't just look at it as there was a projector in this space before, so I'm going to replace it with another projector. Don't look at it like that. Don't look at it as there was flat panel in this space before, so I'm going to replace it with flat panel again. You want to make sure, again, that you are utilizing the entire portfolio of course, Sharp NEC or whatever your display manufacturer is at that particular time, that you're utilizing their entire portfolio to make the best decisions possible, right? Next one's going to be personal space, personal screens, remote students. Now, this is a full remote learning atmosphere. This is the one that we can't control. This is the most complicated setup, and it's also the one that scares most of us the most, because we can't control what's on the other end, right? So, in this scenario, there are institutions out there, there are universities out there that offer their remote students, desktop displays, desktop monitors, because at the very least, they can ensure that you're not trying to do a course or a seminar or a lab from your smartphone, right? Which is obviously detrimental to most people's learning style because the screen is too small. So there's universities that actually send for their remote students desktop monitors to every single student, right? And they help them with the connections and things like that. So to take away the X factors. But the reality is, again, this particular setup can be a multitude of different displays. You can have the confidence monitors that you see on the bottom there for your professor. You can have direct view LED in this kind of concave shape, right? Slight curve shape for the professor to kind of bring everybody in. Or you can do projection and create a fully immersive experience. Again, the point is you want to make sure that you're considering all of the display technology that's commercially available, because at any point, that technology is going to have to interface with itself, meaning projectors were probably 60% of the solution before. Maybe they're only 40% now, and there's some direct view LED in there, and there's also some flat panel in there. Again, use the whole portfolio. If you want to talk about the future of learning spaces, it's understanding, and I have a slide coming up here, is understanding how to marry all of these different technologies into the same space cohesively. So if we take it one step further and we talk about beyond the classroom, we're coming to a close here. Beyond the classroom is interesting because I know a lot of your responsibilities rest in classroom tech, right? A lot of the accounts you deal with is classroom tech specific. But I would venture to say that if you plant the seed of being able to offer some services outside of the classroom, for example, a big one right now is public safety, right? So monitoring of public spaces, making sure that your live camera feeds have somewhere to go into a central control room. Again, there's multitude of different displays that you can use there. Traditionally, it's been narrow bezel video wall product. It's now kind of moving into either projection in a blended format or even direct view LED. We've also got e-gaming that's taking the world by storm. A lot of universities have full e-gaming programs, and they're just looking for different displays, right? Now, of course, you're going to have your displays from your gaming companies, right? The ones with the high refresh rates and zero lag and things like that. But then what about the large venue? What about the viewer? What about the arena, right? The e-gaming arena. That's when we start again talking about projection and direct view LED. Just in general, if you think about this, projection technology is one that will continue for the foreseeable future to be the most cost-effective way to get the largest screen possible. So I know the world and the industry is pushing everybody toward direct view LED. And that's great. There's definitely a space for that. But I don't want you to forget that projector still has a firm grasp on large venue applications. You've also got wayfinding, right? So we've got applications where we point projectors at the floor to do crowd control, crowd management, crowd flow, and of course wayfinding to make sure that people know where they're going. It's an unintrusive way to do, directional activities because everybody's already looking at their phone. So you're halfway looking at the floor anyway. So instead of putting a sign on the wall that says the bathroom is this way, we actually just shine the projector on the floor. We've got applications where we do the digital floor mat, where we've got a 10 by 10 white space in the breezeway of an academic building, and we can change that messaging on the fly by pointing a projector at the floor. Again, digital welcome mat. It can be advertisements. It can be absolutely anything that you need to convey to the students. Menu boards. So we've got universities that are using. If you look at the image in the bottom center, that's actually shiplap type wood that's suspended from the ceiling. That they're shining a projector, just white text, and there's two 5,000 lumen projectors that are creating a digital menu board, right? So in this space, of course, we could have done monitors for a digital menu board, but if you look right below that, that's a food prep area. When you put monitors, large flat panel monitors, above a food prep area, they end up with food in them. Well, if you're using shiplap wood as your canvas and you're projecting from 10 feet away with 5,000 lumens, that problem goes away. So digital signage, art exhibitions, of course, rental staging and different events like that, donor walls. There's opportunity in every building on a campus, right? There's opportunity. So don't just settle for the classroom upgrade, the classroom refresh, couple projectors here, couple interactive monitors here. Understand how you can impact the entire learning experience, the campus experience, campus-wide. So constant question, again, the question that should be in your mind, as well as those 8 questions that I talked about in the beginning, how would the technology I help deploy enhance the learning experience? Like it or not, if you are involved in educational technology, you are a part of the education process, right? So it is your responsibility to make sure that every piece of technology that you help deploy has a purpose and has a space in that learning process. And again, a lot of that comes from conversations. I would challenge you not to stop your conversations with the audio video department, right? If you're upgrading the business school, why not have a conversation with a professor that actually uses the room? Why not have a conversation with, the dean of that college that actually understands the voice and the experience of the different professors that use those rooms. So again, let's make sure that we're covering all our bases and we're uncovering more opportunities when we're on these campuses. Bottom line, in order to meet the needs and achieve the goals of current and future spaces, you must use a variety of display technologies simultaneously. That's the big secret. The future of school spaces is using a variety of display technologies in the same space, cohesively and simultaneously, all in concert with one another. It sounds easy to mount interactive here, flat panel here, projector here, DV LED over here. Yes, that process is easy. But getting all of those images to look exactly the same, quite challenging. That's where somebody like myself comes in, right? So I'm on what's considered the solutions team for Sharp NEC, and it's my job to make sure that the technology that you guys deploy makes sense in the space, right? So when you are talking about introducing multiple different types of technology into these spaces, let's make sure that you can hit the ground running, make sure that you've got all of the answers to the questions that you may have. My contact information is here. You can go ahead and screenshot that as well. And with that, I will flip it back over to Julie if we have any questions.
Great, Mark. This has been very educational. I've learned a lot anyways. A couple questions did come in. The first one was, what do you think are the 2 biggest considerations that integrators should focus on when they're designing and or selecting their display technology?
Yeah. So if we're talking about a classroom, the biggest consideration, in my opinion, is the sight line, right? I know it may seem menial, However, if a student can't clearly see the images that the professor needs them to see to grasp the information, everything is irrelevant past that, right? And most students are not going to change their seat because they can't see the screen, unfortunately. So we have to, again, we have to look at sight lines. Not necessarily is there a pole in the way, but viewing angles of projection screens and viewing angles of direct view LED and flat panel televisions all have to be taken into consideration. So I would say sight lines is number one. Number two is just going to be consider, specific rooms, consider the teaching style of professors that use certain rooms a lot. If the teaching style, again, is going to be that seminar style where they're in the middle of the room and they're walking basically in a circle the entire time, consider where you put your displays. If they're going to be in the front of the room, consider where you put your auxiliary monitors, things like that. So I would say those are the two biggest considerations.
Awesome. Now, do you think that projector technology is outdated or in any way, shape, or form going away?
Yeah. Projector technology is as tried and true as the automobile, in a sense of the automobile in its basic form has always had, for the most part, four wheels, an engine, and a driver, right? But now there's electric automobiles, right? Now, electric automobiles will eventually put gasoline automobiles to sleep, most likely, just like laser projectors will definitely put lamp projectors to sleep. However, the technology and the overall concept of getting a giant screen for the price of, a fraction of the cost of other technology, that's not going anywhere. As long as people have budgets, projectors will be relevant.
Okay, excellent. Now, is Sharp NEC display experience any supply chain issues?
Of course.
Of course, who isn't, right?
Right, who isn't? The good news there is our leadership, our management, although they did not have the ability to predict the future, they did anticipate change pretty good, I must say. They did a lot of creative things to bring in stock when we needed it. They're still doing a lot of creative things. They're being very smart about timing. They're looking out even further than before. And as a result, our backorder situation on a lot of the products that were heavily constrained is gone, right? We have stock in most product categories. And the product categories that we are backordered on, I can still give you a solid date, meaning a month and a year, when you're going to get that product, right? I mean, if you look at something like projectors, a lot of our projectors are back ordered now, but everything will be fulfilled by the end of October. We'll be out of the situation that we're currently in, right? So again, at least I can give you an answer at this point.
That is promising. Very promising. Well, thank you, Mark. That does look like all the questions that we had today. If anyone would like to review this presentation, we will have it posted on our EDGE website, which is edge.technology. Make sure that you're leveraging all that EDGE has to offer for you. I want to thank Mark and the entire Sharp and NEC team. And that will conclude today's presentation. So here's Mark's info if you want to ask any other questions after today. But I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.